Ever get this like eerie feeling like the whole world of politics is, I know, kind of like a crumbling Roman ruin?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
We're diving into this article, right? It's called The Crumbling Pillars, Examining the Fall of Modern Politics. And honestly, it's got me thinking, are we like headed for a full-on collapse? Or is there still, a chance to rebuild?
It's a huge question, for sure. And the article, it really doesn't hold back. Paints a pretty stark picture of just how big the challenges we're facing really are.
Yeah, no kidding. Seriously, one of the first things that jumped out to me when I was reading this thing was this whole fractured relationship with time idea. How do you interpret that?
That's such a powerful way to put it, don't you think? This whole idea, like the article's arguing that a lot of people, they're clinging to this like romanticized version of the past, right?
Yeah.
Which just makes them totally dissatisfied with how things are right now.
Right.
And that dissatisfaction is fertile ground for populist rhetoric, which always promises that return to a better time.
It's like we're so busy looking over our shoulders, staring back at what might have been, that we're tripping over the problems right here in front of us.
Exactly.
And speaking of problems, this article, it does not pull any punches when it comes to the whole declining trust in institutions thing, does it?
Nope, not at all. And it makes a direct connection. This decline in trust, it's directly tied to the rise of populism.
Makes sense.
When people lose faith in the traditional institutions, governments, the media, even science, they're more likely to turn to leaders who offer those simple solutions, often by scapegoating or making big promises to drain the swamp, that kind of thing.
Oh, for sure. And we've seen that play out in some pretty different ways around the world, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. The article points to Trump's rise in the U.S. as like a prime example of this.
Yeah.
He tapped into that distrust, that yearning for a simpler time, and he really shook up the political landscape.
Total curveball. It's like he looked at the whole system, cracks and all, and was just like, hold my beer.
Right. And it was unconventional, to say the least, but it resonated. A lot of people felt like the status quo wasn't working for them, and he tapped into that. But here's the thing. It's not just about figures like Trump, right? This populism thing, it can show up on both sides,
Okay, so it's not just a left-wing or right-wing thing. It's like more universal.
Exactly. The article even talks about the decline of the AKP party in Turkey. They came into power on a populist wave, but people got disillusioned. Their popularity has taken a hit.
So it's like populism can disrupt things from the inside and the outside. That's honestly kind of scary.
Yeah, it really underscores that no political system is immune to this stuff. And this kind of leads into another big crack in the foundation, political polarization.
Ugh, tell me about it. It's not even about disagreeing on policies anymore. It's like we can't even be in the same room as someone with a different opinion without, things getting heated.
Yeah, right. And the article, it argues that this level of animosity, this total inability to find any common ground, it makes it next to impossible to even start addressing the real problems we're all facing.
It's like we're so busy fighting each other that we don't notice the house is on fire,
Exactly.
And the article, it doesn't let social media off the hook for its role in all of this.
No, definitely not. It talks about how these algorithms, they create echo chambers where we're constantly bombarded with stuff that just reinforces what we already think.
And then we're shocked that other people have different opinions. Like, where did they come from?
It's wild, right? This constant echo chamber, it makes it harder to even imagine bridging that gap. Everyone retreats further into their own corner, not willing to even listen to a different point of view.
Speaking of different points of view, the article mentions this. I thought this was interesting. This idea of double haters. So these are people who distrust both of the major parties or major figures. Have you encountered that?
All the time. It's like they've just given up on the whole system. They're done.
I get it, though. It's disheartening. But, is it really that surprising? When you have a system where it feels like nothing gets done, where compromise is a bad word, and all you hear are the loudest, most extreme voices, are you surprised that people are just checking out?
It's understandable.
Yeah. Right, and that actually leads us to what might be the most worrying part of the whole article, this idea that these cracks we keep talking about, they're not just political differences anymore, they're full-blown threats to democracy itself.
Okay, so we've established that things aren't exactly peachy keen in the world of politics right now. But the thing is, this article, it doesn't just leave us with a bleak outlook, right?
Yeah.
It offers some potential solutions too, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's kind of like, you go to the doctor, they give you the bad news, but then they're like, okay, but here's what we can do about it. And that's where this whole discussion of proactive measures comes in.
Proactive measures, so less doom scrolling, more, I don't know, actually doing something. Exactly. It's about getting ahead of the curve, you know. The article really emphasizes that we can't just sit back and wait for things to magically fix themselves. We have to be proactive about strengthening these systems, you know, make them more resilient. And it highlights three main areas for action: institutional reforms, civic engagement, and a renewed focus on political ethics.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit. Institutional reforms, it sounds kind of bureaucratic and boring, but I'm guessing it's important.
Oh, it's crucial. Think of it like, okay, imagine the foundation of a building, right? You got to reinforce the pillars, make sure they're strong. So with these reforms, it's about identifying the weak points in our systems and figuring out how to make them less vulnerable to corruption, manipulation, that kind of thing.
So patching up the cracks before the whole thing crumbles.
Exactly. And those patches, they can look really different depending on what we're talking about, right? The article, it mentions things like, I don't know, electoral reforms, like making it easier and more secure to vote, right? Campaign finance reform, got to get that money out of politics. And even like constitutional amendments. Sometimes you got to go back to the blueprints and clarify stuff.
Makes sense. Because if the rules of the game are messed up, nobody trusts the game. But I'm guessing these reforms, they probably don't happen overnight, huh?
They don't. There's always going to be pushback, right? People who benefit from the way things are, they're not going to give up power easily.
Yeah.
But the article's point is these reforms are essential if we want people to start trusting these institutions again.
Okay, so it's not just about top-down fixes, though, right? It's also on us, regular people, to actually, get off the sidelines and do something.
100%. The article makes it clear that these reforms, they're useless without civic engagement. It's like buying a fancy new security system, but leaving your front door wide open.
Right. We can't just expect the political mechanics to handle everything.
Civic engagement. It's about being informed.
Yeah.
What are the issues? What's going on? Hold our leaders accountable, right? And then actually participate in the process. Vote, contact your representatives, go to those town hall meetings, organize with your neighbors. There's a million ways to get involved.
It's about reclaiming that ownership over our democracy, remembering it's not a spectator sport.
Exactly. And this is where that whole political ethics thing comes in. Because it's not enough to just participate. You have to do it with integrity.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about that. Political ethics, I don't know, it feels kind of like an oxymoron these days, right? But the article, I get the sense it's saying it's more important than ever.
Absolutely. Because when people see their leaders being shady, putting themselves first, lying, manipulating, it just erodes trust in the whole system. People get cynical. They check out.
It's like that whole, what's that saying? If voting actually changed anything, they'd make it illegal.
Exactly. That's cynicism. It's a real threat. So this focus on political ethics, it's about demanding better. Transparency, accountability, call out bad behavior, hold people to a higher standard. We can't just accept dishonesty as the norm.
So basically trying to restore that belief that people in power should actually want to serve the people, not just themselves. Pretty idealistic, I gotta say. But are there any examples of this actually working?
That's the thing. The article doesn't really get into specific success stories. And honestly, it's tough to think of a perfect example. No country has cracked the code completely.
Yeah, no utopian societies of political virtue.
Not that I've heard of.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean these principles are useless, right?
Yeah.
It just means putting them into practice. It's a grind. It takes work.
Yeah.
And you got to be willing to challenge the status quo.
So what you're saying is, the article highlights some serious issues, but it's not all hopeless. It's a call to action. Hey, we're not just along for the ride here. We can actually do something.
Yeah. Exactly. The future of this whole politics thing. It's not predetermined. It's what we make it. Every choice, every action, every time we choose to engage, it matters.
It's a lot, but it's also kind of, empowering, isn't it?
Totally. Because even in the middle of all this crumbling, there's always that possibility, that chance to build something better, something stronger. But it's up to us to actually do it.
So, listener, we've talked about, these cracks in the foundation, how things are maybe kind of shaky. And we've gone over some ways people are trying to, reinforce things, maybe even rebuild from the ground up in some cases. But it really makes you wonder, what if none of it's enough? What if this whole fall thing, this whole collapse the article keeps talking about, what if it's just, inevitable?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And I got to be honest, there's no magic 8-ball for this stuff. We can't predict the future.
Yeah, trying to predict the future of politics, that's got to be, right up there with reading tea leaves and tarot cards.
Uh,
A recipe for disaster.
totally. But just because we can't predict the future doesn't mean we should just give up.
Right.
Instead of, trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen, maybe we should focus on being ready no matter what happens.
So less fortune telling, more like, I don't know, prepping for anything.
Exactly. It's like, okay, the article doesn't give us a play-by-play of how this is all going to go down, right?
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
The point is to think about what could happen,
Yeah.
Explore different possibilities, be prepared.
So instead of freaking out about, is this the end? It's more like, okay, if this is the end, what do we do?
Now you're getting it.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about. It's not about having all the answers.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how complicated this stuff is, looking at it from all these different angles.
And maybe asking some good questions along the way, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of which, this whole deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. What
What's
about
that?
you, listener? Anything really stand out to you?
What got you fired up? What are you still turning over in your head? Did you learn anything new about this whole, mess we call modern politics?
We always say this, but seriously, keep the conversation going. If you want to check out the full article, we've got a link for you in the show notes. The Crumbling Pillars, Examining the Fall of Modern Politics. It's a mouthful, but it's worth a read.
And don't stop there. Talk to your friends, family, that coworker who's always up on this stuff. Now's the time to really, engage, have those conversations, especially now.
Exactly. Because even if things feel like they're, falling apart, there's always that chance, that possibility of building something better on the other side.
Well said. That's what we're hoping for anyway. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep digging for answers, and most importantly, never stop learning.